Welcome back to another video. In this video, we are learning about the process of succession in hydrosia, a part of community ecology. Process of succession in hydrosphere. When succession of vegetation starts from a water body such as pond, it is called as hydrarch or hydrosia. The stages in hydrosia or hydrarch are briefly described below. Plankton stages. The pioneer community consists of cysted spores which germinate first in the new lakes or ponds. Spores are dispersed their uninhabited places by dispersal agents such as animals or wind. Population of phytoplanktons includes phytoflagellates, autotrophic diatoms, cyanobacteria, etc., which can withstand the harsh conditions and are regulated or controlled by zooplanktons. When these phytoplanktons are dead, they decay into organic substances and after mixing with slit forms soft mud at the base of the water body. Then rooted submerged stage, Utricularis hydrilla. Plankton stage, rooted submerged stage. Utricularis hydrilla, Vallisneria, etc. The rooted submerged hydrophytes, which grows on the soft mud at the water body bottom where these hydrophytes are dead. Their organic matter along with the sand and slit leads to deposition of extra soil layer at the top of the soft mud, and this given gradual rise to bottom level of water body like ponds. All the decaying matter is a good source of human forest successive vegetation. Then rooted floating stage, Trapa, Nympha, Nilumbo, Monocoria, etc. are the leaved, floating and anchored hydrophytes. That's the next stage, rooted floating one. Trapa, Nymphia, Nilumbo, Monocoria, etc. are the leaved, floating and anchored hydrophytes which invade this area and make it mineral and organic matter enriched. After these anchored plants, Lemna, Asola, Iconia, Pistia, etc. are the new free floating hydrophytes. The decaying matter of these plants will make the water level shallow. Once again, I'm going to read this to point out the examples. Plankton stage, spores. And here we can see phytoplanktons and flagellates, autotrophic diatoms, cyanobacteria, etc. When these phytoplanktons are dead, they decay into organic substance and after mixing with slit form soft mud at the base of the water body. Then rooted submerged stage, Utricularis. Hydrilla, Vallisneria, etc. Then rooted floating state, Trapa, Nymphia, Anelumbo, etc. Lemna, Asola, Iconia, Pistia, free floating hydrophytes. The decaying matter of these plants will make the water level shallow. Then reed swamp stage, Reed swamp stage, hydrophytes like Sagittaria, Typha, Grippus are replaced, etc. replaces the rooted and free-floating stage of succession and are called as amphibious stage. These plants used transpiration mechanism for large amount of water loss and are a source of huge amount of organic waste. These waste materials of organic matter settle down at the pond's bottom and make the environment unfavorable for this amphibious plant growth and development. And then sedge meadow stage. The stage is mainly habitated by hydrophytes like Jacquis sedge tree, Carp X, Diocanthium, and herbs such as Polygonum, Cathia, etc. This stage of succession is also called as marshmallow stage or marshmallow. These vegetations have a characteristic rhizomatous system which forms a mat-like covering, and this develop a mesic condition which is unsuitable for their own growth. Then woodland stage. Woodland. Shrubby plants like Cephalanthus, Cornus, etc. invade at the periphery of area. These shrubby plants can tolerate a waterlogged situation and bright sunlight. Later, other invading plants also grow there, such as Alnus, Populus, etc. The soil buildup amount of minerals increases, and further falling of these trees into the ponds leads to enhanced soil formation, which further favors next seral community colonization. Forest stage. Forest stage is dependent on climatic conditions and leads to climax community. For instance, tropical rainforest within heavy rainfall areas, tropical deciduous forest in moderate rainfall habitats, etc. are the forest stages. Plankton, floating, climax, woodland, marshmallow, reed swamp stage, floating leaved, submerged. Submerged, plankton, floating leaved, reed swamp, marshmallow, woodland, climax. Process of succession in lithosphere. Another example of succession can be studied by understanding the succession occurring in the dry land. The succession initiating from the dry land is called as xeroarch. Xeroarch or xerosia is further categorized into lithosphere, defined as succession sequence which begins from the rock surfaces. The succession sequence in the growth and development of lithosphere community includes following stages. Lichen stage. The pioneer community is composed of lichen species such as Rhinodina, Rhizocarpon, and Lecanorama. The stage is also called as crustose. Crustose or lichen stage. The pioneer community is composed of lichen species such as Rhinodina. The stage is also called as crustose, and the species of the stage can tolerate desiccation. So lichens grow on rock surfaces by secreting acidic substrate which will corrode the rocks and produce minerals and gaps within the rocks. These gaps are filled with organic matter and soil particles as a result of wind action and initiate formation of soil. This initial formation of soil in the depressions of rocks supports the growth of lichens called foliose lichens such as Phaeacia and Parmelia. Foliose. These newly invaded foliose lichens. So these are living inside the depressions of rocks. Okay, the newly invaded foliose lichens aggregate more soil particles as well as water, leading to form formation of thin soil layer on rocks. Folios. Moss stage. After the stage, moss stage. Gremia and Polytrichum are the mosses which invade in an area due to the thin layer of soil on rock surface. After some time, these mosses will accumulate more soil particles, water and organic matter and lead to colonization of moisture, leaving mosses such as Bryum, Hypnum, etc. and these are called as moss stage of succession. Then herb stage. Moss, when decomposed into organic matters, forming a mat over fragmented rock and provide a then next herb stage. Moss, when decomposed into organic matter, forming a mat over fragmented rock and provide a substratum for the seed germination of annual grasses such as Aristicla, Eulinicin, Poa, etc. The death and decay of these grasses leads to replacement of the vegetation by perennial grasses such as Heteropogon, Combopogon, Cymopogon, etc. Invasion of small animals were also encounters at his stage of succession. The next shrub stage. Shrub stage, colonization of shrubs such as Ziziphus, Caparis, and Rheus are favorable of rock weathering and mineralization. Shrubs are larger than herbs in size with deep root penetration and further leading to soil formation via rock weathering. Then forest stage. Forest, that's it. The environment is now favorable for the colonization of hard and stunted trees requiring sunlight for growth. Mesophytic type of vegetation is supported by environmental factors and this leads to an equilibrium, stable and steady stage of succession between biotic community and environment. For example, coniferous forest in temperate regions are the climax community. Exposed rocks, lichens, mosses, grasses and weeds, mixed herbaceous plant, shrubs, young forest, tulip popular, mature forest, white oak or hickory, then climax forest, birch, beech trees and sugar maple. Hydrosia, viney stage, submerged stage, floating stage, reed swamp stage, marshmeadow stage, woodland stage, climax forest community or mesophytic community. In case of Cerosia, pioneer stage or crustacean lichen stage, foliose lichen stage, moss stage, herbaceous stage, shrub stage. Theories of climax community. The succession of community structure attains a stable and final equilibrium state called climax community suggested by Shimwell in 1971 and Clements. This stable community is in accordance with the predicting biotic and physically environment and is self-perpetuating. Birth rate, death rate and growth process induce structural changes in climax community. The following are the four theories of climax community. Monoclimax theory. In 1936, Clements suggested the monoclimax theory of succession, according to which all communities of different regions to reach climax community. He believed that climax is a determining functional factor of climax and climate is a determining functional factor of climax and vegetation is solely influenced by the climatic conditions of the community. This climate-based theory termed various stages of succession process as subclimax, post and pre-climax, with stabilized climax as a last stage of community. Other than climate-controlled community, exceptional cases of edaphic soil, topographic and biotic factors influencing communities are also discussed under this theory. Then polyclimax theory. In 1939, Dansley proposed a polyclimax theory which was supported by Dobenmeyer in 1966. According to this theory, in an area, the climax of a community may have varied type of vegetation, and these are called as climaxes. These climaxes are influenced not only by the climate, rather by the activities of animals, soil nutrients and moistures, etc. Unlike a monoclimax theory, climate is one factor among all other influencing factors regulating the stability and structure of climax community, and allows multiple climaxes, and thus are called polyclimax theory. In 1994, Krupp suggested that it is the time-independent relative stability measurements which differentiate between the two theories. The factors influencing climax varies with the geological time scale and ecological time scale, such as climate. Thus, different vegetation helps to reach different climax, leading to a continuous succession. Therefore, the monoclimax theory and polyclimax theory mainly differ on understanding the functional factor which is responsible for establishing the steady state climax community. Then climax pattern theory. In 19 climax pattern theory in 1953, Whittaker proposed climax pattern hypothesis. The climax pattern theory of succession holds that the existing ecological community is affected by the entire pattern of environmental factors. The environmental factors influencing the community can be climate, site, activity of animals, biotic, soil, species, genetic structures, plant and animal species, dispersal, wind and fire, etc. This theory emphasizes on the total environmental conditions regulating the pattern of population constituting the climax community. There is no single functional factor influencing the climax community, and thus there is no mono or polyclimax. Unlike monoclimax hypothesis resulting into one climatic climax in an area and several climaxes in polyclimax theory, the climatic pattern theory allows continuous inseparable climax types under the influence of gradually changing gradient of environmental conditions. Climax as vegetation. In 1954, Egler hypothesized in broad sense that the whole pattern of vegetation represents the climaxes. He favors the vegetation study of an area, as by the careful observation of the vegetation we can predict the community conditions. Thus, from these entire hypothesis, we can conclude that the ultimate goal of succession is to achieve a stable form of community structure called a climax. The climax community can be disturbed and completely stable. The vegetation of an area is totally controlled by the existing climatic conditions, but the broad climatic zones leads to many climax populations under the influence of animal activities, topographic and soil compositions. Monoclimax theory, one climate, one climax, by Clemens. Monoclimax theory, one climate, one climax. Polyclimax theory, variable factors. Climate. Polyclimax theory, climax. Climax pattern theory, gradual environmental changes, overlapping climax. Climax as vegetation, climax is equal to vegetation based changes in vegetation observed. So these are the four theories: monoclimax, polyclimax, climax pattern, and climax as vegetation. Monoclimax theory is by Clemens. Polyclimax theory, Tarsley and Dobenmeyer. Then climax pattern theory by Whittaker. Climax as vegetation by Hegler. Now let's have a summary. Communities are regularly changing or dynamic entities. The development of these community initiates on arrival of the propagules or their parent organism to the area of study. The first developmental stage of the community is called as the pioneering community, which is made up of those few successfully survived and established organisms or their propagules. The nature supports only those organisms which adapt and fit best to the changing environment conditions. The changes occurring during the entire process of community development is ordered and highly directional. Until the community becomes in complete accordance with the environment and become a relatively stable community, the process of development and change in community continues. This highly directional and sequences changes in the community are called as succession. Many ecologists, along with Cowles, studied the successional process by using the chronosequence approach. This temporal approach is later replaced by another approach that uses spatial differences between communities. Spatial differences means locations of different ages are compared to understand the process of succession. Here is defined as the stage in the succession sequence. Based on the association between individuals with their biotic and abiotic factors, ecologists suggested two types of succession process: primary and secondary succession. Primary succession, the establishment of community in an area never been habitated by organisms or where no prior existence of life is evidenced. The more common type of succession is secondary succession, where the existing life forms of community are partially destroyed by small scale disturbances, for example, forest wildlife fire. Initially, in the unfavorable environmental conditions of this disturbed disturbed habitat, only few species from the surrounding areas invade, and then they modify the habitat by alterations such as soil component composition, amount of sunlight or shades on grounds, etc. The first community established in an originally completely lifeless land is called a pioneer community, and the plants and animals are called pioneer plants or animals. After the successive changes in habitat environment, a stable community is achieved, termed as climax, dominated by few prominent species. The community with a stable state of equilibrium is termed as climax community. This climax community is characterized by stable environmental conditions, limiting any further admission of other species in the community. The stages of ecological process of primary succession include following stages: nutation, migration or invasion, excess, aggregation, competition, reaction, and stabilization. The process of secondary succession is almost similar to primary succession except for steps. The limiting factors in secondary succession is the disturbances. Both types of succession resulted into stable and steady state of ecological equilibrium called a climax community. Halosia, Hydrosia, Xeros arc or Xerosia, Lithosia, and Samosia means sand, and Cerule, decaying logs, etc. are the different types of ecological succession occurring in plant communities. The stages in hydrarch succession include initial plankton stages followed by secondary stages like rooted submerged stage, rooted floating stage, reed swamp stage, sedge meadow stage, woodland stage, and forest stage, ultimately leading to climax community. The succession initiating from dry land is called Xeroarch. Xeroarch or Xerosia is further categorized into Lithosia, defined as the succession sequence which begins from the rock surfaces. The succession sequence in the growth and development of Lithosia community includes stages such as lichen stages, moss stage, herb stage, shrub stage, and forest stage. Birth rate, death rate, and growth processes induce structural changes in climax community. The following are the four theories of climax community: monoclimax theory, polyclimax theory, climax pattern theory, and climax or vegetation theory. Climax as vegetation theory. Thank you for listening.